Tonight, live and in color, TBS presents the new game in town, the World Football League.
The United States Football League Championship Game 1984.
TV has always been the lifeblood of alt football, but we have never seen the marriage of both on a scale like we will see with the United Football League this year. If this works, it could be the launching pad of success for a viable spring football league. If it doesn't, let's bring in James Larson from Pro Football Newsroom. And James, you wrote an article that really breaks down very well all the TV coverage that's coming up with the UFL. And you pointed out that nearly 3/4 of the games will be broadcast on over-the-air networks, which led to a very, I think, important quote that you have in that article. There are no excuses for spring football not to work. Tell me about that sentence and why you believe that.
Well, John, that's a great question. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where we've seen so many of these leagues come and go. And I feel like this entire time, the golden standard has been 2020 and what the XFL had then. You look at the numbers, you look at the ratings, you look at the attendance, you look at like all of these different factors that went into 8 really strong brands. Like even some of the weaker brands in Tampa Bay and Los Angeles still did pretty well, all things considered. So what I mean by no excuses is we're kind of back to square one. You look at the fact that now we have Fox, ABC, ESPN all behind this league is very reminiscent of what we had back in 2020 when the XFL was putting up some really, really good numbers. So not to say that the XFL in 2023 and the USFL over the past couple of years, they had some decent numbers in their own regard, but they weren't up to the same level that we had in the XFL back in 2020. So the fact that we have those 2 major broadcasters back together, ABC and ESPN, and then of course Fox Sports, it's very similar to what the XFL had in 2020, and I think it should lead to some excellent ratings. I mean, like I said, there's no excuses for them not to have good ratings this time around.
That's right. And I totally agree with you on that. Now, you and I might disagree on something here, and I'll get to it. But to summarize it, you put it in your article, 10 games on ABC, 21 on Fox, 10 on ESPN, 1 on ESPN2, and 1 on FS1, which I think is, as we're speaking now, that's always subject to change. They can move something here and there. But the important thing, the vast majority of these games are going to be on over-the-air networks. Now, there are, I believe, 3 times you said in your article where there's going to be a crossover where the games will be regional. You're not a fan of that. My initial blush was I wasn't, but now I might be. And I'll explain that. But tell me why you're not a fan of that regionalization with those start times being the same.
My biggest issue with that is that the UFL is not necessarily an established league yet, right? The NFL, they can do that because you're going to have millions of viewers for those games regardless of whether they're no matter what. With this league, the USFL and the XFL, they struggled on a lot of those OTA games. I mean, the XFL had some decent numbers on ABC, but especially looking at the USFL, some of those Fox and even some of those NBC games, like where you had 600, 700,000, it's like it felt like the ceiling was much higher for what it could have been. So right. I feel like in season 1, you want to get this thing in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And I think one of the unique things about spring football is that you have the opportunity to watch, or you should have the opportunity to watch all 4 games each week. Because, there's only 4 games every week. It's a 10-week season. So you're looking at that aspect where now, for a few of those games, like you said, it's 3 different instances. You're only going to be able to watch one of them instead of both of them. Unless somehow, I'm sure there's going to be a couple people out there that somehow figure out how to watch both. But the general public is not going to be able to do that. So, that's my take on it is I feel like I said, it's year 1 of a brand new league. You want to get it in front of as many people as possible. We've already seen some of these numbers not be ideal the last couple of years. So I feel like that could hurt it. But again, it's only a couple of games, thankfully. So.
Right. Yeah. And when I first saw that too, and I read that in your article, I was like, yeah, this is a dumb idea. But the more I thought about it, my thought was, okay, if there's only one game, and let's say it's Arlington and Houston, okay, that's the one game. But now that there are no more, well, there is a hub, but no, they're not playing in hubs anymore. I thought, well, what if, Birmingham and St. Louis are playing? Would that be a game at the same time? And I'm not sure what they are, but just using those as examples. Wouldn't that be an opportunity for people who are in Birmingham or St. Louis or in that general area to say, casual fans, I mean, and I think that's what's important. UFL has to get casual fans on board. They would be more likely to watch something in their region, just like the Arlington and Houston region would want to watch their teams, so to speak. So to me, I don't think that regionalization is going to hurt that much, and might actually put it all together. They actually might get more viewers. Does that make sense?
Now that you put it like that, it does make sense.
Right.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think it's
Yeah.
one of those things where, like you said, we really got to get the casuals to watch this, because there
Yes.
is a ceiling right now. What we saw in the USFL and the XFL of give or take around 1 million. A couple of those games, like the championships, of course, you got 1.2, 1.4, 1.5. There's the one USFL game where you had that nice lead in on NBC with the Kentucky Derby, and you got 2 million for that. But generally
Right.
speaking, these numbers on OTA haven't been, and I guess by haven't been great, I mean, you look at what they had in the XFL in 2020, and it's not even close. So,
Yeah, and I think you're right with there. This is a huge opportunity, especially on network broadcasts. I want to say that this year's slate has a potential to have record ratings in spring football, but I have to couch that.
absolutely.
But I will have to couch that and say, like, in the modern era, because you probably don't remember the original USFL. That was a little before your time, but there was a time when it got 6 million viewers on ABC, like in 1984. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to see a 6 million view. And TV was very different in 1984, but nevertheless, I think we will see in modern era that there should be record ratings. To me, I think success would be on average about 1 million viewers. Now, you think it could be a little higher than that, right?
Like you said, TV's a lot different these days, and now with
Right.
streaming services and all those different options you have there, and another thing is ABC and ESPN games; those will be on ESPN Plus, and those numbers weren't released last year. The Fox Sports app will be streaming the Fox and FS1 game, so
Right.
it's one of those things where we'll have to wait and see. I think 1 million is pretty fair. I think 1 million would be good success when you look at the overall layout of having games on ESPN, ABC, Fox, but what we really need to see is some of these primetime games, some of these big matchups, right? Like, especially the middle of the season, big rivalries between, I don't know, Birmingham and St. Louis, or whoever it might be,
Right.
Birmingham and Memphis,
Yep.
St. Louis and DC, some of those big matchups. I'd love to see them in primetime getting 1.8 million, 2 million, just hopefully we see that. And like you said, now that we have the 8 teams, they're all in their own markets. There's no more hubs, because that's another thing that I know the USFL took a lot of crap for last year with some of those games with low ratings. But it's like when the Houston Gamblers are playing the New Orleans Breakers on USA Network and they're
Yeah.
playing in Memphis, realistically, how many people can we expect to tune into a game like that? Now you've got Birmingham playing against Memphis in Birmingham with a ton on the line in week 10 or whatever it might be. That's a game that should do good numbers.
Yep, I think you're right. I think, for us sicko diehards, we're going to watch no matter what. But
Exactly.
you mentioned the casual fans; those are the ones who end up watching the product over the air, and then you've got to get those people back and invested. And a couple things, James, that I'm looking forward to seeing is, first of all, the initial ratings, because that's going to be pretty important barometer after the first couple of weeks, which those could be the highest of the season because of the curiosity factor. I mean, when the Alliance of American Football was first on CBS, it debuted on CBS, it had 3 million viewers in prime time. Obviously, that did not hold up as it went on and on. But so I'm interested to see what the initial ratings are. And then after maybe the curiosity factor with casual fans is worn off, let's go into midseason and see if those ratings are steady. They might drop, but I think that's going to be kind of the barometer of maybe success, or at least fan acceptance. What do you expect out of that? And is that something that you would kind of keep an eye on as the season goes along?
100%. And, to your point, we can go back to the XFL in 2020, where they had 3 million viewers for a couple of those games there in week 1. And then by the time we got to week 5, which is the last week that they played for obvious reasons, we don't need to get on that story. But there, a couple of those games, I think, were around 800, 900,000, but they were doing 800, 900 on cable. They were doing that on FS1 or ESPN on cable, whereas in the USFL, FS1 games were getting 300, 400,000. So that's the type of thing that hopefully they capitalize on. And like we mentioned, FS1 only has one game, ESPN2 only has one game. And ESPN is the primary cable network here. And I mean, ESPN is a massive sports channel. So you got to expect that those cable numbers are going to be up this year.
Yep. And hopefully we'll get two things. Hopefully we will get a lot of these streaming numbers released to us. And I hope we get attendance figures too, because that's going to be something interesting too. Now that there's no more true hub system, just the one in Arlington, and then they go to and play in their home arenas. I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot of spring football leagues try and fail. And, James, just in the last, 3 years, we've seen, we mentioned the Alliance of American Football, the 2020 XFL, by no fault of its own. COVID put an end to that. We've seen just so many, different leagues fail. But going back to what you said in this article about no excuses if this doesn't work, to me, with the backers that this league has, with the network backing that it has, if this doesn't work, to me, this might be the last time we see spring football on this kind of scale. Would you agree with that?
That's exactly what I meant by that point. Is
Right.
This is it. This is the final stand, right? Because we've seen these leagues come and go. We see the potential that's there, but it just always feels like there's something getting in the way for these leagues at some point, whether it was COVID, whether it's the USFL and their hub model that definitely didn't help get more viewership, or in the XFL, you had a lot of those games on some smaller channels like ESPN2, like FX, and there's so many factors that we could break down and get into on that. But yeah, I think that this is, like you said, the backers, the fact that we've got Redbird Capital coming in, the fact that we got Fox Sports sticking around, like this is such a strong foundation for a league that hopefully lasts 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Really, let's see them get past year 1, year 2, and then we can really start having those discussions about, all right, this thing's going to be around. But I'm excited. I think this is this is the platform for success right here. Like I said, if this one doesn't work, then yeah, it's over.
Agreed. And I'm excited too, because it just seems like everything is falling into place. I know I was expecting at least 10 teams in this first season of the UFL, but as I think Pat Ruffino said, I'll take 8 teams over the span of 4 or 5 years versus 12 to 16 teams, and then you end after the end of the season. So financially, it seems like this is a good move, and it's got the network backing, and it's got, as you mentioned, the money backing it too. So it should be interesting. James breaks down a lot of things, television, everything off the field and on the field for pfnewsroom.com, Pro Football Newsroom. And so check him out on all the socials, and be sure to check him out there. Thank you, James.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, John.